Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 18 of the His and Her Life Hacks podcast. I'm Larry.
And I'm Dawne.
And we're joined by Ethan A. Poetic, our special guest, who we'll introduce here shortly. But Ethan, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a wonderful opportunity to be on your podcast.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Ethan's a native, grew up originally in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, which is in Chester County. And for those of you who join us from locally here, that's the same county Dawne and I are in. So happy to have a fellow Chester County native joining us as well. So let me just take a second to formally introduce you, and then we'll jump right in. So Ethan A. Poetic is an author, graduate of Millersville University, an Award of Excellence recipient from the state capital of Pennsylvania. His book is titled The Inspirational Story of Ethan A. Poetic, Chronicles of Adversities, Education, Sports, Relationships, and Resiliency. Ethan has an amazing story, which he's going to share with us today, of overcoming a near-fatal collision with which he was given a 1% survival chance. Days later, though, he was declared a walking, living miracle as he walked out of Lancaster General Hospital, and then he embarked on a long road to recovery. Today, Ethan is the CEO and founder of Ethan A. Poetic, LLC, to empower people towards overcoming their adversities, life's challenges, and hardships. He is currently a keynote speaker, life coach, mentor, mental health advocate, and self-published author. So welcome.
Welcome, Ethan.
Yes, that's me.
So great to have you here today. So let's just dive in. Tell us a little bit about your life, maybe in your late teens, early 20s, and then what happened?
Growing up in Coatesville, I was raised in a single-parent household of 5. We were in poverty. It was a situation where, my mom had multiple kids by multiple different men, while at the same time those men had multiple children by multiple women. And it's a weird feeling to know I have another sibling living in a different household that I don't get to see it often. And back then there wasn't much internet or FaceTime or video chat. It was simply you either see someone in person or you get a phone call, maybe write a letter. And that was that feeling growing up that I had 3 other siblings outside the household that lived somewhere else, and I didn't get to see them. It's kind of like a one night only show. Well, you're either there or you're not there. But ultimately, I just wasn't expected to do much based on the standards of public education. I used to be in the learning support classes, IEP meetings. I remember those. But I realized the real reason for learning support classes is for school districts to fill in the budget gaps to get grant money from the federal and state funding, such as the Department of Education. And the truth of the matter is that, those things really target, Black and brown people intentionally by design, because there wasn't anything disabled about me.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't anything, crime written about me. It's just I was targeted because I was in a single parent household, and I met that demographic and their target audience. Because when you know your client, you know your customer, you know who to do the outreach to.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference when my dad never showed up to one parent-teacher conference meeting or IP meeting to go at the bat for me. And it's all documented by adults. So that thing also meets your target audience. Which person can you get? And why is this person not here? We'll make them look like somebody who doesn't care. But the reality is just that's the situation.
Yeah.
But moving forward, I was still a student athlete. I was part of the undefeated football team with Gordon Middle School for my 8th grade year. We had numerous talented student athletes that went on to graduate college, such as Steve Brazel, Clarence Smith, Cadozer Jacks, and many others. We were all projected to start varsity by our 10th grade year at Coastal Area Senior High. But unfortunately, my mom decided to move the family to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and that was a big transition, and that's where I met Coach Matt Ortega, who has been the head football coach of Coatesville Area Senior High School.
Okay.
So you met him in Lancaster, though, not in
Yes.
Coatesville.
I met him in Lancaster. It was just, I remember like it was yesterday, I get my 8th grade promotion from Wheatland, where I spent less than 2 months at that new middle school. Then I'm signed up for football, get my physical. Then it's time to do the workouts. I see Coach Matatega, Coach Damian Henry, Coach Scott Feldman, Coach Savinsky, Coach Susie, Coach who is now Dr. Todd Mealy, Coach Camara, and many others. And they played a very important role in my life in that transition, because I honestly didn't want to move to Lancaster, because for a kid to leave everything and all the livelihood in Coatesville to move to Lancaster, that's a big transition. And then to leave friends behind, leave certain teachers, and then not be part of that expectation of being the next group of student athletes to win Chestnut gold medals and get that recognition, whether it's in the daily local newspaper, and if you win states, you get recognized at the Pennsylvania State Capitol.
Yeah. Well, when you're from this area, Coatesville does win state championships, right? So.
Yes. I eventually did get honored and recognized at the state capitol for something much different. Just more my inspirational story by Ishmael Smith Waddell, who's a state representative of Lancaster City.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I moved around as a child myself, and it was very disruptive. It was very hard, very challenging emotionally. So I can relate for sure. So fast forward, you've graduated high school, and now what? What were you doing?
Well, prior to me graduating high school my senior year, I already had a job at Arby's, just being a roundsman in between, putting out the trash, making these sandwiches, working the fryers. But then after doing that for like a month and a half, I saw this restaurant called Ruby Tuesdays having interviews, and my neighbor picked up the application for me. I filled it out. She dropped it off. A couple of days later, they called me up for an interview, and I get hired on the spot. And I told, the manager, we had a talk in the back. I told her, hey, I'm going to be transitioning to a new place of work, which is going to pay me more money and be much closer to my residency. And I still did the 2 weeks notice. And I was working both jobs at the same time. By damn at Ruby Tuesdays, and then there's that 2-hour break, and then I'm working at just working nonstop. And then once the 2 weeks was over with, my body finally recovered.
I bet.
So take us then through. So then you were at post high school. Then what were you doing that kind of led up to the time of the accident, and kind of take us through that?
Originally, I was working this other job at R.R. Donnelly, but that didn't last long. And I ended up becoming a professional video gamer. I remember like it was yesterday, back when my hair used to be long. Yeah, I always get my hair braided by this girl. She was in my neighborhood. And I was watching MTV, and I saw these guys were professional video gamers playing. And I'm just wondering, wow, that looks interesting. Once I saw Madden, and they're playing for money, and they're playing at the tournaments, I realized that's the way for me to go. And I took it professionally, where I learned all the videos on YouTube, read a couple of books online, start practicing my offense, my defense, my special teams, adjusting the depth charts, knowing my audibles. And I was playing with the Philadelphia Eagles. And from there, I started meeting people in my neighborhood, people in Lancaster City, Philadelphia, and start traveling a little bit. And eventually I ran into this guy who was in charge of the Madden Federation, who choose who gets to go on the Madden bus. And he liked what I was doing, and I was going to be a potential candidate. And I had this vision, I'm going to be on that Madden bus, beat everybody who I can, and eventually be the top 2 players that are going to play for $100,000 in the middle of Times Square.
Wow.
But unfortunately, life took a turn where the economy crashed during the same time. Unfortunately, Barack Obama became president, and that's when they took away the Madden bus. The tournament money went down to very low amounts, and that vision that I had being on that Madden bus just went away from me. So then it was trying to hit the reset button on life, and eventually I ended up running into Jordan Steffi after a very personal situation happened in 2010. Saw him in church, and he sat next to me by coincidence. After the service was over, I asked him, "Are you Jordan Steffi?" He said, "Yes, that's me." We shook hands, we talked afterwards, and we just kept running into each other throughout Lancaster City by coincidence. Eventually introduced me to his family, his mom, grandmom, you name it. And then along the way, he invites me into his nonprofit organization. At the time, it was called Children's Ever Chance Foundation, now rebranded to Tyler Prep, where they help certain people, whether it's in high school, middle school, during that time period, to get acclimated to learn what the SAT prep is, PSSA, visiting colleges, learn about entrepreneurship. Then they end up expanding to people who learn more about the military, or if they want to do a trade, learn how to do an internship. And that was the plan he had for me. It was a bigger plan than what my parents had. Because I never seen someone willing to show me a different way of life. But I also realized someone was willing to show him a different way of life, such as Daryl Daniels, his mentor, and his former football coach who turned into his father figure, Mr. Novak, and many other people. So he was paying it forward several times over while making an impact in people's lives.
Sound like he was a great mentor to you.
And that's what you're doing these days. So it paid forward within you as well. Let's fast forward to the day that your life changed, your accident.
I was helping out Jordan Steffi in the foundation along with several other people at the Mead Heights Golf Tournament. And we were raising money by selling the Dewsbury watches for the nonprofit. We exceeded expectation during the breakfast shift and lunch shift. We were all happy and everything. Then when it was time to leave, I left with my aunt, my uncle, and we picked up 2 of my cousins. And we're heading on Route 30. And the last I remember seeing is just a Hess gas station. Then there's the Rockville outlets, the Tanger outlets.
Yeah.
Mind you, I don't remember the car accident. It's like a situation where I'll give you an example that you can relate to. Is like, let's say you're at a party, you have a good time, catch up with people, do a couple moves on the dance floor, and you go about your life and you remember it the next day. When it comes to my accident, it happened. I was there. I was present, but I don't remember. It's a situation where it took me some honest soul searching by looking at the newspaper article, hearing what was said about me on the radio, and then looking at my Facebook wall, like, whoa, all these people were praying for me?
Wow. How did that feel? Was that eerie or?
There's 2 sides to it, or multiple sides to it. Like, when I first saw it, it was almost a month later where I was inside the rehab, and this woman who's a nurse allowed me to use her Facebook page, and some people were wondering why I didn't respond back to them. When I told them, they didn't believe it until they saw my wall. And then on top of that, when I did see my wall, I'm like, wow. But mind you, I'm on all these medicines that have desensitized my body's 5 senses. So it's like I see what's going on, but I can't feel what's going on.
Yeah.
Because when you get medicated on a heavily state, it's kind of like I'm on cloud 9, except I'm still functioning. But in this situation, my body's just not that good. As far as the car accident goes, when I looked at that car, it was cut in half. It was more cut in half than a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, more cut in half than smoked beef brisket.
Mm.
And it was yourself. So who was in the car? It was everyone you said who had
Yes,
left.
yes. And it was just a situation where I'm like, wow, did this really happen? And I'm in this hospital? Because at first I thought it was just me, because that's all I saw was just me. But unfortunately, a couple people passed away. The uncle, a little cousin.
Mm.
I wasn't able to make it to anyone's funeral, and I wasn't in a position to.
Yeah.
Right. You were
And
fighting for your life.
yes, it's like, for example, the car accident happens in Paradise, Pennsylvania, near Vintage Road.
Mm.
And then I'm just like looking at, using my imagination while looking at other people who've been through something similar. Like, can you imagine someone stopping what they're doing in their life and all of a sudden they got to call the cops because they see an ambulance? Can you imagine someone stops what they're doing in life to call the fire department and the police? And here comes the police with the yellow tape. Then the fire department comes out with the jaws that like to cut the car in half. Then you got the EMT people pulling me out while putting their finger on my neck to see if I have a pulse or any blood flow. And then there's also the part where they put a neck brace on me. They put me on a stretcher and strap me down. And after that, it's time for me to go straight to the nearest hospital, which is Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And that's about a half an hour ride from Paradise, Pennsylvania to Lancaster, Pennsylvania in the city. And this is where I use my imagination even more. It's like my parents get the phone calls. Now they gotta stop what they're doing, come to the hospital while they're in faraway places. My siblings get the phone calls. It was like a nightmare while realizing this is reality and it's time to be there and be present. I was told the visiting room was over capacity.
Hmm.
And, I could just say basically when people like saw me, they were like, whoa, this is serious. This is more serious than the text message they got. This is more serious than the someone telling you gotta come to the hospital message.
So Ethan, you write about 1% chance to survive. Like what? But doctors give you that. Like what was that based upon? And then it sounds like a few days later, all of a sudden you were this walking miracle. Like what happened? What was?
I should have died within 3 minutes due to internal bleeding. My aorta got severed from the seatbelt. Then there was a fractured collarbone, a left black eye, a concussion, which pretty much had me black out or just knocked me out. Then my wrist was hurting, and then when you're losing blood internally, it's like it's only a matter of time before you succumb to your death. But for some reason, it just didn't happen that way. That 1% chance was just based on the probability that 99% was going to succeed as usual. But what I tell people all the time is that it took the faith of a mustard seed of that 1% to beat 99% chance, like the mathematical equation of the denominator and the numerator. People all the time think 1% is going to get defeated by that 99. Well, it just didn't happen in this situation. Even when I was on the operating table, they was like wondering how am I still here before they do this emergency surgery. And eventually, they thought they lost me on the operating table. Instead of they thought about calling the morgue and all the other people declared me dead. They decided to put me in sedation and see if I wake up. Meanwhile, while I'm on the operating table, this woman cries hysterically. And then when I do wake up, I woke up twice. One's in a cloud nine state, which I don't remember. The second time is when there's some less medicine, but I see this woman at this door, and she's crying hysterically, like tears of joy, like you are alive. And that's the day I was declared a walking living miracle.
Well, clearly you had a mission to accomplish because you're here talking about it and sharing your story everywhere. So there was a greater purpose and plan for your life. So you talked about faith. How much has your faith played a part in all of this?
I was on over 30 prayer lists. People coming into the hospital, rehab, in at my house doing Bible study, and I remember meeting with the chaplain. Then there's also just people just doing an outpouring. I remember the anointing with the oil on my forehead, where praying for me to eventually eat again because I was on the feeding tube for several months.
Mm.
And it's no joke to be on the feeding tube. We gotta keep it clean all the time to avoid an infection. And I couldn't eat or drink anything. If I did, the consequences are pneumonia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say this one thing, but I'll say that for another time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, pneumonia is nothing to play with.
No.
Yeah.
So how long? So it sounds like it was a long recovery process. And that you did that out in Lancaster. How long were you in the hospital for?
At least a month.
Okay.
At least a month in rehab as well, and then several months on that feeding tube. It was like a lifesaver, but at the same time, it was just dreading that here I am in this house, here I am in the rehab, just looking out the windows, like watching life go by while I'm still in this recovery freeze. And it just got to the point where I'm like, wow, I really am missing out on life, but here I'm watching television. Here I am just, when I go to bed, I gotta I gotta put a towel underneath my mouth because my mouth was just watering for some reason.
Yeah.
And it was dripping more than a dog.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, I understand a baby drools, but me as a grown man, I'm drooling more than a baby. And I'm not even in a bassinet. I'm inside my own bed.
Yeah.
So you
And
had to
it's,
fight extra hard to come back strong and
yeah.
overcome all these challenges.
Yeah, it was more fights than the Karate Kid movies 1, 2, and 3.
There you go. So Dawn mentioned, right? This is was this was your mission, right? You fought through it. When did you start to understand, as you had recovered and maybe life was starting up, that this was your purpose? Now you were kind of given this opportunity, and you could go multiple ways with it, but you decided to take it and help others, right? Who may have going through similar things. When did that happen? When did that kind of thought process start to, resonate inside of you and say, you know what, this is something I need to go pursue?
A lot of things that happen that I talk about in the book. There's this quote I learned: "It gets worse before it gets better." A lot of people thought when I started eating again, drinking again, putting on weight, my life was going to become better, but it was some delays that I talk about in my book where I thought I was going to receive the help of certain individuals, but it turns out they were just stonewalling me, holding me back. And unfortunately, the best revenge is success.
Yeah.
And that's what ended up happening. And that's a true living example that I talk about in several of the chapters in my book. It's a hardcover, softcover, ebook, and audiobook as well. Well, there's a lot of things that happen between being detoxed off all that medicine to where starting to feel my body's five senses again, but then dealing with all this emotional stuff, like what just happened?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until several years later when I got featured in this newspaper that I realized I was going through survivor's remorse.
Yeah.
I wish I would have understood that feeling much sooner than later. Then there's also the situation where I got invited to Lancaster Country Day School to do a poetry workshop as a spoken word artist and poetry. And I just got done communicating with that woman. Her name is Miss Meg Reed, who's now administrator. And people don't understand that people who do come from wealth do got problems as well. And that's why they keep their circles small.
Mm.
And that's the truth. But I was able to show the kids like how to tell their own stories by using their own words by looking at my story. I didn't want to talk about what I went through at the time. I just wasn't like ready.
Yeah.
And I allowed them to use the markers, the crayons. It was a great turnout, and I realized I can do this for a living. And I realized at that point, I wasn't in college. I was still in that recovery phase, like mentally, like just like realizing I do have a purpose. I do have a life. It wasn't until let's see, a situation happened at a job where people like, obviously say if you're a parent or guardian, you're definitely going to know who's working with your kids, whether it's in education, after school, sports programs. And, parents have these small conversations with me, like chit chats. And then the next time I see them, next thing you know, they're wondering and pull out their cell phone, like, is this you from the car accident? I say, yeah, that is me. Mind you, internally, I'm thinking, I came to work to focus on work, not that. And I saw them smile and feel proud of me. What they didn't understand is that that's the vulnerable side of me. That's the open heart stuff. And I'm in a more present tense. It wasn't until my boss told me that I'm an inspiration. So I got to learn to deal with it. And that's when I ended up realizing we got to change the narrative into present tense. And that's what inspired me to like start making posters. I didn't make the posters myself. I had help. Highlight student athletes, local leaders, officials, people in politics and government and community leaders to show that, okay, I understand I am an inspiration to a lot of people, but at the same time, this is what I'm doing in the present where I am a college student. I used to work for the school of Lancaster, and I used to own a 95 Ford Taurus car. Then eventually I got a brand new car. That was like, I believe it was a Honda Civic 2016, right out the showroom. That's red. I talk about that story in my book as well. And then in 2021, there's this guy named Kyle Slaymaker who encouraged me to start my own business. And then I met with this married couple, and they helped me start the LLC of A Poetic LLC. The same time I was changing my last name from Dawne to Poetic. And I was in the final stages of, or so I thought I was in the final stages of writing my book, but I realized I still got more things to write about and dived in deeper. And that's when I realized I could be a keynote speaker, author, mental health advocate, self-published author, thanks to Angry Spark. And allow myself to tell my own story, my own narrative, and tell how it is from a person who was on the front lines, but also experienced it from the before, the beginning, somewhat the end, but also the best is yet to come.
Yeah, for sure.
How cathartic was it for you to write that book? Was it part of your healing process? I mean, ultimately, you wrote it to inspire others, to help others, but what did it do for you personally?
I was actually encouraged by the Veronis family, which is Greek. It was in the spring semester of 2020. I was at Millersville University. Passed that semester during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm at their house having lunch. And one person said, Ethan, you should write a book. Another person wrote it. And it was like you're at a council meeting and everyone's saying I except me. And I was just not comfortable like talking about it yet, because when my anniversary would come out, I usually just do the post like, here's my picture, or here's some Canva. That's it. Pay my respect to someone who makes sure I'm still here on Earth.
Yeah.
But they weren't trying to hear that. They kept feeding me lunch, and the key to a man's heart is to his stomach. And eventually I said yes, and before you know it, start the writing process, and I get contacted by publishers, and they talking about, is it true you're writing your book? Oh, that's great to hear. We want to see you this contract. This your email? All right, we're going to send it to you. The contract looked good. They passed my question tests. Problem was, they said if I sign with them, they turn my movie into a soundtrack and a movie.
Wow.
So they were already thinking about a multi-million-dollar deal with me, and we hadn't even had lunch, breakfast, or dinner yet. And it's a good thing I didn't, because they said they were going to own the majority rights of it, which means they're going to get the credit, the money, and leave me in the poorhouse, jokingly. But honestly, I just can't let someone exploit my name, image, and likeness, my story, my intellectual property, especially when I'm the person who went through it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just couldn't go out like that. So that's part of the reason why, I was debating between Amazon or Ingram Spark, and chose Ingram Spark because of a variety of platforms I can have my book on. It just be on me. That's help promote it on all social media platforms, from Amazon, Audible, Kobo, Walmart, Target, Barnes and Nobles, all major platforms for both the audio and the physical copies and electronic versions of my book. And there was a couple of times while I was at work, when I used to be in the classrooms, for some reason, the teacher decided to take a coffee break in the middle of her lesson, and all of a sudden wanted me to take over and read my poem to the kids. That's out of my book. Then I remember that another time in the summertime, this teacher wanted me to speak about my story instead of covering the math and reading lesson. And I'm like, this woman researched me as well. I was going to say, if people keep researching me, they're going to realize I am not on America's Most Wanted. But ultimately, I realized it was making an impact with the kids to the point where they wanted my autograph and take pictures. And next, more and more parents and guardians and administrators found out. And eventually, I was recognized by the school board at my request with a letter of recognition for my 10th year anniversary of Welcome the Miracle.
So, what are you most passionate about what you're doing today? So today you're a keynote speaker, you're a coach, and you visit different schools, you share your story in different ways. What are you most passionate about as far as what you're doing today?
Selling my books.
And your book?
This is my soft cover. This is my
nice
hardcover. And, it's educational. It's been used for professional development. Inside a juvenile facility. It can be used inside prisons or federal penitentiaries. What I enjoy the most is just being able to live my life freely. It did come at a cost to, I did make an announcement, on social media to certain kids. I'm not going to be in the classrooms as much, but you'll still see me around.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not in the same capacity. And then, I still see them in the public eye, sporting events, Walmart, Target, sometimes at the gas stations. And some of them, just so happen to have social media along with their parents or guardians. And it just becomes a situation where it's like I'm moving on up in the world, and I look forward to just continue to evolve. Eventually, I'm going to be a filmmaker, make my own documentary, and hopefully I can make my movie independently with a distribution deal, along with a music soundtrack.
Nice. Sounds like you have big plans.
Well, if it's not big, then it must be small.
That's right.
Abundant thinking, right?
Abundant thinking. That's right.
Yes.
All right. So, this is an amazing story. From where you started, obviously you went through a pretty traumatic, accident that you were very, a miracle, right? That you're able to recover from it. But now, we often talk about, what's your famous quote when you
Oh, when you change, it's by Wayne Dyer. I don't know if you know who he is, but also an author and motivational speaker. He says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
And it
So
sounds to us
that's,
like that, you looked at things differently and then things started to change for you. You could have come out and kind of been the victim, like I had this accident. What was me? Why did this happen to me? But which would be natural, right? I think, a lot of people would feel that way, but you didn't. You kind of decided, I'm going to turn my life, I'm going to change the direction of my life, and I'm going to use this, what I lived through, what I learned, and use that experience to go motivate, inspire, help others through that, right? So kudos to you for doing it. You're an author, published author, and hopefully you'll be a filmmaker, and you'll remember us along the way when you hit the big time.
yeah,
Uh,
become famous. Yeah, and lots of grit and determination to overcome and persevering through challenging times. So that's all great examples of strong mindset and character about you. So thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're an inspiration to many. And hopefully, we'll have a lot of children and adults watching and listening and taking away some of that.
And we'll for sure put the book in the link so people can click on
Yes.
it and go to Amazon and buy their book, buy
Yeah.
your book.
cool.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I just want to say people can contact me on my website for all serious inquiries for my speaking engagements and for my book, ethanspeaks.com. If you trust me with your P.O. box, mailing address, you pay me through Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Zelle. And I just want to say I value my services and my products.
That's great.
And
And we'll put all that in the
we'll
link,
release
like
the
so
social
that
media links.
yes.
okay.
All right. Well, Ethan, it was fantastic to have you on to share your story. It's an amazing story, and we wish you the best of luck as you continue to progress in your endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Ethan.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Take care.
Thank you for listening in to this episode of the His and Her Life Hacks podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. We look forward to having you join us on future episodes. If there's a topic that you would like Dawne and I to discuss, please feel free to contact us at dawn.jacoby@grit2grace.com or larry.ambrose@grit2grace.com. See you on the next one.